Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Johnny Johnson. Johnny, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me on.
No, it is such an honor to have you here. But before we talk about why you're here, Johnny, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You were born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and grew up as a military brat. Your dad was a Marine. Thank you very much to him and his service. So you spent a lot of your youth traveling, living on different military bases, pretty much, every 2 years until you reached the age of 17. And then you graduated high school, went to college and mastered in psychology. And you also started modeling and signed with an agent. And then the rest is history now. So, what was it like for you growing up, going town to town on average every 2 years? What was that like?
Well, that's a good question. I feel like at the time it was a little frustrating
Hmm.
because you would move someplace and then you would make new friends and get settled in. You'd have to stand up to the bully at that school. Let them know who you were.
Yep.
And then everything's fine. Next thing you know, your dad's got orders and you're off to the next place. And you have to repeat the same scenario over and over again. That part was kind of rough. But the good part of it is that it put me in situations where I had to learn how to make friends fast. And I had to
Sure.
learn how to get along with different types of people, different parts of the country. I think it broadened me a lot as a person.
Hmm.
And when I look back on it, I'm glad it happened because it
Sure.
made me to who I am today. And, if I been raised like, say, like most of the people I met that weren't in the military in one town and lived there pretty much all your life, and you had one group of friends, and then you go out to some other city and then it's like a whole new world. I don't have
Yeah.
that situation because I've been used to traveling and doing all that stuff all the time. So when I'm around diverse groups of tons of people, doesn't affect me at all.
That's awesome. Like you said, it's made you a better person because you had to zig and zag, learn
Exactly.
all these different things and learn how to do that. But it also helped you out because you were named one of America's most watchable men on the Phil Donahue show by Susie Mallory. You were recruited by Chippendales, the Ford agency. Like you were a hot commodity, man. And what was to be called one of America's most watchable men has to be one of the highest honors in the world. How did that feel for you?
Well, it felt kind of unreal because, I look at I'm basically pretty humble. I look at myself as just being Johnny, you
Sure.
know, and I never, I never thought any more than that about myself growing up because I was very shy.
Hmm.
And I just put myself into sports and all those kind of things. But then when this happened, it's like, okay, didn't realize that. So I might as well try to take advantage of it and get some work from it. So
Right.
that's the attitude I took at that point from there on.
Well, and you did because you've been an actor for you've done plenty of different projects, including The Night Belongs to Michelob, some Tales from the Crypt work, but also a professional model, modeling for GQ, Ebony Magazine, Nordstrom, Saks, J.C. Penney catalogs, posters, billboards. If there's a place where you can put a human body, you've probably been on it. So, you were probably one of those models in the J.C. Penney catalog when I circled my Nintendo 64. Like that was you right there with it. So we know that you've done a lot. Like I said, whether it's modeling or growing up bouncing around and acting. But do you have any projects? I know NDAs exist, and sometimes you can't talk about it. But do you have any projects coming up that you're able to tell us about?
I can outline them a little, but I can't go into much detail because of what you just said. Um, I have one called Museum of the Dead, and that one I never played a horror character before.
Mhm.
I've been asked to play a really bad villain before, but I've never accepted it, and this time I did. And I play a vampire, and
Nice.
and so I uh, I do some gruesome work, and uh, it's kind of like a dramedy It's a horror
Mhm.
film. It's kind of like a drama. It's drama plus it's got a little comedy in it as well.
Sure.
Um, the writer has pretty wicked sense of humor, and he's also the director. So there will be some things in there that are unexpected.
Okay.
And he told me to make sure I did not let anyone know about what those things would be. So
Good.
it's about as far as I could take it, but it's set in the future. I'll tell you that much. And there are some things that are happening in the future that kind of interesting in this film. And that's when I come to play dealing with those interesting aspects. I know it's kind of a teaser for you, but that's as far as I can go with it.
No, please bring it. I love that. So, the best way to stay up to date on Museum of the Dead and all the amazing things Johnny has coming up is by following him on social media. And you don't have to go far to do that because I have all his social media links right down in the description, guys. So make sure you're
Nice.
following him on social media, like I said, so you can stay up to date on all the amazing projects he has coming up for us in the future. And you can get an ETA on when you will be able to check out Museum of the Dead. So that to me is the perfect segue because we know what you're doing in the future. You're playing a vampire. But now I want to go back to the past and kind of stay on that topic. I want to talk about what got you started in horror, your first horror movie. And Johnny, the first horror movie you watched was.
The Horror of Dracula. It was a Hammer film
Mhm.
starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee scared the crap out of me. It was, I had nightmares, dude. It was one of those movies that I'd never seen a vampire movie. I've seen like little touches of them before on TV, but this guy, I mean, he just mesmerized.
Yeah.
And he had, there was a certain thing about him. The more I thought about the movie, I saw, at first it scared me. Then later, the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what? Actually, this guy has a sexual aspect to himself,
Oh, yeah.
you know? So women are attracted to that,
Hmm.
you know? And because I was wondering, how did he get all these women that he was able to kill and all this? Well, there it
Yeah.
is. And I didn't think about that the first time I saw it as a kid, but as I got older, I started to realize those things. Um, but yeah, I guess vampires have always been kind of a lure, but it's also been one of those things where people are attracted to them. They're afraid of them, but they're attracted to them.
Hmm.
I never could really gauge that, you know. But yeah, that was my first one.
I've always said that, especially Dracula, when you get to the Hammer films, especially that gothic horror aesthetic, like he is sexy, and the men want to be him and the women want to be with him, that type of thing. And, um, it to me, vampires have always had, and you hit the nail on the head. As children, we don't notice that stuff because we don't know it. We don't know what sexualization is when we're children. But then to grow up and rewatch all these vampire movies, you're like, God damn, these foreign dogs, like, holy cow, man. Like, they get everybody. Like, what is going on here? So I completely agree with you. And I think that that's an amazing thing because sexualization has always been a part of horror. I think that taboo nature has always been a part of horror, and the Hammer films especially nailed that right on the head. So, um, we know the Horrors of Dracula was the first horror movie you watched, but do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen it?
I'm guessing maybe 8 or 9.
Right at the impressionable age.
Yes, enough to keep me awake at night.
Right. And do you know do you remember who you were with when you'd watched it for the first time?
I think I was with my dad and my older brother at that
The
time.
two worst influences a boy can have.
And you know something, at that time, another thing that I didn't realize about vampires was that whenever I saw him bite someone,
Yeah.
I knew the two teeth went into the throat. And I thought that the blood was going to be sucked up through the teeth. There were holes in
Right.
it and go in like that. But later vampire movies I've seen, it appears that they just bite the hole in the neck and then they use the whole mouth and just
It's funny. I was like, it's almost like, is there tubes in the teeth? You know, that suck it
Exactly.
right up. You know, like
Exactly.
it's funny how the imagination of a child watching these things, because we all think the same shit. You know, 'cause I thought that same thing. You know, they bite and then the blood goes into the teeth, and that's how they get the blood in. You know, the Horror of Dracula, like I said, I've always been a big Universal monster guy, and I love the Hammer films. I love the gothic aesthetic they were able to put the spin on, especially with Dracula. So, do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most from the Horror of Dracula?
Um, I can't say exactly. I do, when I try to think back on it, I see one scene where he is a close up on Christopher Lee and his eyes are like turning bloodshot. I see that. I remember his face is like just pasty and his eyes were like bloodshot. And it was just so creepy. That's the one thing I see. But the times when I think that look and him coming at Peter Cushing, that scared me. But I'll tell you something else. This is on a different movie though.
Hmm.
Fright Night. Did you
Yeah.
ever see Fright Night?
Oh, love Fright Night.
Okay, so like watching Fright Night, I that movie that put some scares in me too. And I was older at the time, but the scene where I think it was Malcolm McDowell. I think that's was that the actor who was playing the had the horror show that he put
Oh,
on.
I
Roddy
got it.
McDowell,
I know his name's Peter Vincent in the movie.
right? Roddy McDowell was his
Roddy
real.
McDowell. There you go.
Okay, so when he is trying, he's got the cross and he's throwing it up in the vampire's face, and the vampire just grabs a hold of it by his hand and just holds it and tells him,
You have to have faith for this to work on me, Mr. Vincent.
that just like really blew me away. I'm just going, whoa, just throwing the cross up is not going to do
Right.
it.
Like you said, it's always been you can't step foot in a church. If I hold a cross, you're done. If I hit you with a stake, that's it. The way he
Right.
just crushes it. You know, you have to have faith for this to work on me, Mr. Vincent. You're just like, okay, damn, I'm sorry. Like, my bad. Like,
Exactly.
so something we all love with horror is originality, you know, and especially back then, the Universal monsters were something that came completely out of left field. But especially with the horrors of Dracula, we haven't had much of a Hammer horror renaissance like we have the others. We've had a lot of remakes in the other worlds, but now with Hollywood remakes, requels, sequels, it's kind of all the rage. Would you like to see them try a Hammer version of a Dracula movie today?
Why? I don't think they could really accomplish it, to be honest. I think it would be really hard to repeat that.
Hmm.
Um, I think it would just have to be someone who takes a whole different take on it, something that nobody's thought of before. I'll give an example of somebody who I think could do something like that. Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
could see him taking a whole different take on it and taking you places you haven't been before in that realm. I mean, like with Dusk to Dawn,
Hmm.
you know. Um, so there's another one that has that kind of thing, but to try and recreate what Hammer films did would be very hard. They had such a gothic look to them, and I just don't see that. I don't see any studios being able to do that.
I agree with you 100%. The way that um, they were able to pull off such a gothic and extreme look back then, I think it would almost feel pandering for them to try to do that today.
Yes.
I don't think that it's a visual they would be able to nail the right way. I completely agree with you. So, whenever I talk about, you know, a movie in general, if it's part of a franchise, I usually ask people, "What's your favorite film in this franchise?" But since we're talking about Dracula, and even though it is the Hammer version, he'll always be a universal monster to me. So instead of asking you what's your favorite, since the Horror of Dracula's was that, which of the Universal monsters would be your favorite?
Oh, okay. So let me make sure I've got the monsters in line that you're speaking of. Wolfman, that'd be one of
Yep.
them. Okay.
Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Invisible Man, Phantom of the Opera.
Okay. I I did, since I mentioned Wolfman, I would probably say outside of Dracula, Wolfman, in that universe, Wolfman would be
Yeah.
the one. Because you've got this guy who is just a regular guy, who happens to get bitten by a werewolf, and now he's doing something that he didn't ask for,
Right.
but you got two sides. And the movie, did you see, speaking of Universal, the movie Van Helsing?
Yeah.
Okay. When what was it? The lead actor got bitten by the werewolf and turned into a wolf man, and the changes that he went through, and how he went after Kate, I guess it was Kate Blanch, was it what was her name? The girl from Underworld.
It's Kate. It's not Beckinsale.
Beckinsale. Isn't that her?
Is it her?
Yeah.
Okay.
When he went after Kate Beckinsale in that movie, although he was going to kill her, you could tell that there was a little resistance in him. So he had a little bit of his human side was still there. That's what I like about the Wolfman, because sometimes he can have some of that human side still within him. I guess if the
Sure.
moon's starting to get a little cloudy over it, a little covering, then he starts feeling that humanity again, although he's still in the transition form. So I would say Wolfman.
Okay.
How about you?
Which is a great choice.
Who would be yours?
Oh, Creature from the Black Lagoon. I'm a huge sucker for the creature. I think it's one of the original Beauty and the Beast tales. Like I really think that they went into they went into his backyard. He fell in love. Then he was the monster. He's like, yeah, I was just chilling at home, man. I was just swimming around, and you assholes came to my house. Like, what do you want me to do? So obviously, horror is something that means a lot to me. It's something that I've been around my whole life, and it started at very young for you with the horror of Dracula. But here for a second, I do want to throw you a little bit of a curveball. My
Okay.
little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Johnny? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Ah, The Omen scared the crap out of me. So I'd probably say The Omen. I haven't watched it that many times, but I've watched it a few times, which is enough. and
Yeah,
and I think that, and I've seen scenes from The Exorcist. I've never seen the whole film, but I think those two movies would be the ones to answer your friend. Um, those would be the ones because to me, those two are a lot more closer to reality
yeah,
than any of the other horror films that are out there. I mean, there's slashers and all that stuff. And sure, there are people that actually do those kind of things, but the spirituality and the good versus evil as far as spirits are concerned from the Omen and the Exorcist, that really like hits a spot.
it's terrifying. I've always said, for me personally, the scariest things are a crazy demonic child or a crazy demonic grandparent, because those are supposed to be the sweetest things in the world. Your grandma and grandpa or the children.
Yeah.
But once they turn evil, it's like, this is not fair. It's evil grandma. I can't do nothing to evil grandma. She's still grandma. So that's why those have always been the scariest to me.
So was that I've never seen the movie Pearl. Is
Yeah,
Pearl about a grandma that, yep, that's what I thought.
an overly sexual grandma that
Okay.
it's great. I love that whole trilogy, X, Pearl, and Maxine. I think that whole trilogy is so well made. And each movie, if you watch them in chronological order of going Pearl, X, Maxine, they're all shot so different. The way that the camera is, the bright, like Pearl is more like a Wizard of Oz story. Then X is more like your gritty Texas Chainsaw Massacre like story. And then the newest one, Maxine, is kind of like a polished RoboCop looking, like definite 80s vibe. Like they all have their own feel, and being a part of the same trilogy, that had to be super hard to accomplish, but they did it so well.
Huh. Okay. I know
Can't
Maxine.
recommend them enough. I think all three of them are absolutely fantastic. And I would, instead of watching them in the order they came out, being X, Pearl, and Maxine, I would strongly recommend watching them in chronological order of Pearl, X, and Maxine. That way you can see, because Pearl is her when she's younger, X is her as the crazy older lady, and then Maxine tells the story of Maxine. So I would Pearl is definitely the movie Pearl is more of a character study horror movie. Like it is very monologue driven, very beautiful sights. Like I said, it reminds me of The Wizard of Oz, the colors and the brightness. And it has that vibe, like it was shot on film again. So I again definitely recommend all three of them. I think you would love them.
Okay. All right.
So Johnny, I've had an amazing time talking to you about horror and the struggles of growing up being a military brat. But before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question.
Okay.
We're going to go back to Horror of Dracula, and what we're going to do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. We're not being critics. All we're doing, Johnny, is ranking this movie on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Johnny, what would your ranking of the Horrors of Dracula be?
I would have to give it a 4.
Which is a very fair ranking. Seeing a white-faced Christopher Lee with the red blood and the bloodshot eyes, that's enough to stick with anybody, man.
Yes.
So, and I know I said this at the beginning, guys, but we're at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, make sure you are following Johnny on all his social media links. They're down in the description below. Knowing that horror started for him with the Horrors of Dracula, and now he's playing a vampire in Museum of the Dead, those type of things swell my little heart to see things come full circle like that. So the Ken Sledge's heart grew 3 times in size this day. So I'm very excited to be able to check this out and see him playing this miserable vampire creature. But make sure that you're following the man who is absolutely amazing, as you've learned today, at the social media links down below. Johnny, please don't go anywhere, my friend. I got a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. It does help build the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.